Nice.
We are live.
Hello, YouTube.
Yeah, this is kind of an interesting moment in time because the previous episode, which we recorded at the end of March, just came out. So
yeah, it's actually fresh for once.
Yep.
We might have some chance of not saying the same things over and over and over again because I always forget what we've talked about because the last episode we recorded hasn't come out yet and won't come out for 3 months or something. So
right. Okay, let's see.
Oh wait, so before we actually jump into everything, I see that it said the host enabled local recording. Does that mean that StreamYard does this for us now? I actually don't need to bother with Audio Hijack Pro and stuff like that?
I would say keep bothering with
okay.
Yes. So yeah. there's multiple levels of failure protection here. So StreamYard will capture it, but it will not solve any like network issues.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm still recording, so good.
Great.
I probably should have put my microphone over here where I look.
Yeah, always put it in front of your screen. Otherwise, you're off axis all the time.
Okay.
Actually, the thing this time, I have a mic stand that is like a floor mic stand that I have next to my desk with an arm sticking out this way. So because I always used to bother me that I would be anytime I would be like typing or like hitting my table, my recording is all just even if it's pretty quiet, it's like picking up the table noise.
Yeah.
So now I guess it'll still be noisy if I stomp on the floor, but I'll try not to stomp on the
floor. Okay. Cool. All right, I suppose we can get started. Who knows how long this will take? But, okay, give me one quick second here.
Also, welcome back, Jack, just in case.
Thank you.
No one's actually said that yet.
Thanks.
Very nice to have you here.
Thanks. It's nice to be back. I've just been doing other stuff, and as I've told you guys on the Discord, like sometimes I have an intention of showing up, and then I'm just tired because it's 10 p.m. here in Stockholm, and I don't know. I used to be like always just Mr. Night Owl, and now it's like, oh, it's pretty nice to go to bed.
Well, plus, you have to apparently break into a guitar store to record.
That's right.
That's a very impressive guitar collection, unless you are actually in a guitar center, which is kind of what it looks like.
No, this is my actual wall of instruments back here. So
wow, very nice.
Thanks.
Nice.
Cool. Yeah, I feel like I kind of like, some people gather computers and things. I have some of that, but I also have a lot of guitars and things. And at some point it's like, well, it's nicer to take them out and put them on the wall instead of them leaving them in a closet. And like, because also if they're in a closet, I'll never play them. If they're hanging on the wall, I have a chance.
Yeah, exactly.
So
that was my same logic I had with my retro computers. I had them in storage. I finally decided I'm never going to use them if I don't put them out. So now they're out and I dust them, but I still don't use them as much as I would like.
Yeah.
I just have to dust them.
Yeah.
All right. I guess I will begin. Let's see. What does it say, Gwen? You are
Undisclosed mountain.
Undisclosed mountain. Yeah, I make everybody very small, and then I can't read everyone's. But okay, anyway. It's June 8th, 2025, and welcome to episode 286 of the Retrocomputing Roundtable. The RCR is a podcast about retro computer news, nostalgia, collecting, and walls of guitars. I'm Paul Hagstrom in Montreal this time, and I'm joined by 3 retro computing enthusiasts. We have Quinn Dungy in an undisclosed British Columbian mountain. How are you?
Sorry, can't talk. Drinking.
Very nice. The print shop drinking mug.
Yes. For those listening to the podcast and not on the stream, I just showed my Joe Strassnyder drinking mug that he sells. It's the print shop thinking screen, but it says drinking. And it's my absolute favorite thing that I own right now. It's fantastic. If there's a way to win at retro, Joe is currently doing it.
Yeah. Also joining us from the DC area is Blake Patterson. How are you?
I'm doing well. Very rainy these recent days. I was just dodging raindrops moments ago, but doing well. Glad we're reassembled, and good to see Jack again on the show.
Yeah. Speaking of, also joining us is Jack Nutting from Sweden. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. It's starting to feel like summer here, which means we haven't seen any hint of snow in at least 2 weeks. So.
Excellent.
No, but it's warming up a little bit, but not enough to like. It's like Sweden always has this thing for me where it's like you always have to be prepared for a possible 20-degree temperature swing any day, anytime. So,
Yep. I relate to that.
Yep.
Are you far up enough that it's like light all the time?
Yes. I mean, Stockholm is pretty far from the Arctic Circle, but still, like, it's 10 p.m. right now, and it just kind of looks like the sun just went down. Although technically, it probably went down an hour or two ago. But like, it gets slowly, like by midnight, it'll actually dark here. But then by about 3, it'll start to lighten up again. So.
Yeah, Canada is actually like that too. The twilight period is like 3 hours long.
Yeah,
it's wild.
Excellent.
Yep.
All right. So we are on episode 286, and we've been following the years that sort of correspond to those episode numbers, which brings us to 1986. The previous episode was 1985, and there was tons of stuff. And then it kind of looks like people kind of took a break for a year. So there wasn't all that much. There are a couple things. So maybe one thing that we could point out that was 1986 was the Apple II GS was released. So that's I think several of us are fond of that. I actually myself only dealt with the Apple II GS in modern times, but so maybe I should let someone else talk. Gwen, you want to?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about it. It was the defining computer of my youth, pretty much. I mean, we had an Apple II Plus for a little while, and then we had the Laser 128. But then, as soon as so I bought a secondhand GS from a guy on a BBS, and that was it for me. That was the computer I always wanted, and it's absolutely my favorite computer that I ever had. It's one of those computers that you have to. It's like a three-legged puppy. Like, you have to love it despite its flaws, and not everybody is going to, because it is a deeply, deeply flawed machine. But there's certain things that it does that are just sort of magical, and it just has a charm and a personality about it that, it, like many of the 16-bit, I think, platforms did, obviously the Amiga and so on as well, the ST, but it's sort of like this redheaded stepchild of the 16-bit era, because unlike the Amiga and the ST, which were incredibly good at a few different things, the GS wasn't really good at anything. I mean, except audio. It had the best sound chip, but even the sound chip had some pretty serious flaws in it that you had to work around. So I don't know what it is about it that makes some of us love this thing so much. And by some, I mean like 10 of us. It's a very small community that love this thing, but they love it more than anything. So, I don't know what it is about this thing, but I absolutely loved it. So I got mine, I think, in 88 or 89. It wasn't new for sure. Mine was a ROM 1, and they were well into the ROM 3s by that point. So definitely not new, but to me, it was extremely exciting. And it's the most excited I have ever been to have a computer. That's my main memory of it, etched in my brain. Anybody else have memories of this thing?
I do. I saw it coming, and I was using a 2E, and I remember when it was announced, and I was quite excited about it. I convinced. I had a habit of selling the computer I had, coordinating that with the release of another one, and trying to move from one to the other. I did that fairly successfully through the years, and so I had all that going, and I managed to sell the 2E. And but interestingly, well, I'll say I went to it was a Saturday. I don't think it was a Sunday. It was a Saturday where it's chosen dealers all around the country in '86. It was August, September, sometime. They had a morning, like an 11 a.m. demo, like at hundreds of different dealers, and I attended this. I remember my mom dropped me off, and I worked my way up to the front. And so that was the first time any of us had actually seen the 2GS, I believe, the way magazines worked and the slow lag and everything. So, and it was very impressed. I was all excited. But what I ended up doing, and I don't remember the hows or the whys exactly, but rather than buying a 2GS when it became available, I bought an Atari ST. And then like a year and a half later, I sold the ST and got the GS. So it was like 87, 88 when I got the GS, but I was all excited about it. But I can't remember exactly why I didn't get the GS at that time. But so yeah, I had a GS back about the same time you did, I guess, despite having attended that. And I think of all the computers I've had, on my listing of, my geeky list of computer page on my blog, I indicated, I still think it's accurate, that the 2GS and the Amiga 2000 were the computers that I most enjoyed having when they were, when they were in their day. And definitely that the 2GS was one of the best, one of the most fun for me.
Yeah.
I have one now, but it's not the same one.
I had a friend in high school who, like, he was. There were very few of us that were kind of like programming people, but we were the ones that had special access in the junior high programming lab and so forth, the Apple IIe lab. We were given access to the shared Corvus disk. We each had our own like little logins and place to store stuff. It was cool. But anyway, he got a 2GS and he loved it. I didn't understand it. It seemed like the banks and 16 bit memory. And I liked my Apple II Plus. Yeah, I mean, it was a tricky project that they were trying to do because they wanted it to be an Apple II. So they wanted it to still run all the Apple II stuff, but then also do the extra stuff. And I think that's where the weirdnesses come in.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, it has literally 100% backward compatibility with the entire Apple II catalog, which is frankly an incredible feat of engineering. But to pull that off, they definitely had to compromise the hardware. I mean, for anyone who doesn't know, of course, the main thing is that all access to video memory is limited to 1 megahertz, even though the clock speed is almost 3. And I mean, that's just like a stake in the heart of this machine. It just about completely cripples it. It really does. I mean, it took after about a decade, people figured out ways around that. But it was, even to this day, it's still the number one issue with the machine, and everything that you write is sort of designed around that limitation as far as graphics and gameplay. But Jeremy Rand, fellow GS enthusiast in our comments here, says that to understand the love of the GS, it helps to remember what JFK said, that we do these things not because they are easy, but because they are hard. It's a machine that was actually capable of a lot, but it was very difficult to make it do those things. And so I think maybe that's why it inspired such a passion, and especially particularly technical people, like the other 16-bit platforms that had a vibrant demo scene and so on. But I think, it could do demos that were comparable to the Amiga and the Atari ST, but it was much more impressive that it was doing those things because it had zero hardware assistance. In fact, the hardware was fighting you to make it do those things. And so I think those of us in the know kind of appreciated that, the technical wizardry of doing those things on this particular machine. I think the challenge of it was a lot of it, for sure. But I mean, that meant commercial software was never very impressive on the machine, because you can't have a machine that is capable but incredibly difficult to make it be capable. That's never going to succeed in a commercial environment, because we can't have demo scene coders at every game company. So that was forever going to doom it. And it was also extremely overpriced because it's Apple, and when it shipped, it had way too little memory, like a quarter as much memory as it should have shipped with. And they did fix that eventually, but those things really hurt it early on. And I think a lot of people's only contact with this machine was at schools. A lot of school districts bought them because it was the new Apple II, and they were all committed to that platform. And then every school just ran 8-bit software on it anyway. And so now your Oregon Trail was in white and blue instead of green and black. But aside from that, I don't think you'd be hard pressed to find anyone who's even touched one of these things.
Yeah, I remember one friend in high school had one, but at the same time, I think I had at about the same time I had just gotten my Atari 1040 ST, and I was like, yeah, okay, that's interesting. Like, it wasn't bad. It wasn't a bad machine at all, but I was like, it seemed like it was so expensive for what it was which was always my argument against Apple stuff in general in like the mid to early 80s. Like, everything was way out of my price range. It's like you can get an Atari 1040 ST or an Amiga 500 for, I don't know, half the cost of a 2GS, maybe something like that. So it's like it didn't make any sense to me as a platform. But I do remember, like, the one thing I remember is playing Leisure Suit Larry on my friend's Apple IIgs. It's pretty good for that.
Yeah. Yeah, and there was something. I mean, the display was very nice on it. So I was in a little Apple II user group at the time, and 3 of us had GSs. But my friends at school, by this point, all had PCs. Like, this was the very early. This is EGA and just very beginnings of VGA, and so they all had those machines. But you have VGA on a 19-inch monitor, 320 by 200. Everything looks very blocky and clunky. And the GS, that's 320 by 200 and 16 colors per line. As many as 3,200 colors, and it's all squished down onto a little 9-inch screen with with very sharp and clean DPI. It looks very, very nice. And my friends always commented that the GS always looked better than their PC stuff. Of course, the dirty secret is mainly just because the tube was smaller, but that makes things look nicer. But that's it. I mean, it had a draw to it. Even people who didn't really like it or want one, there was something about it.
Yeah, I do recall that as well. And I know you guys talked about it in a recent episode about the same thing with the original Mac, that it was like it was very crisp in part because it was so very small. But I remember that same thing with the 2GS. Like it was very crisp, like blocks of color. It was not. There was no bleeding much of anything. It was very like solid.
Yeah, especially compared to some other machines of the time. I mean, the Commodore 64 especially and the Atari ST both have very muddy colors. And, if you're a C64 person, I mean, either you're somehow immune to that or you like it, you think it's part of the charm, but the color palette is very brown and muddy and sort of, unappealing in a lot of ways. But the GS colors are very vivid. This display is very sharp. It's also very aesthetically beautiful machine. The way that it's stacked up with the monitor is very nice. It's a very small, physically compact machine. And the keyboard, I mean, it's the best keyboard Apple's ever made, in my opinion. And I use one as my daily driver sometimes to this day, just because of how nice that keyboard is. It doesn't have all of the keys on it that a modern keyboard does, so you can't do everything. But it's a beautiful keyboard. It's really, really nice.
Yeah, I think the monitor, that's something I'd always noticed. I have a lot of CRTs here, and I went through before I had a GS, I had an Amiga and an Atari ST, and then the GS, and then back to the ST. It's interesting. But yeah, the GS was probably the sharp, because it's a 10-inch screen. It's like the Amiga was 14, the Atari is 12, the GS is 10. But the size was part of it, but it was very, very crisp. The scan lines were minimized as a result, I guess, of the size, and pardon me, perhaps there was other aspects that I don't understand, but I think it and the ST's RGB, I was talking with someone just last week about its clarity. I think I always consider those the nicest of the displays I've used that are CRTs. Pardon me.
Yeah, Apple, this was sort of the beginning of Apple's beginning to use really high quality tubes. These were Sony Trinitron tubes. And so they were a very high quality tube, much higher than you got with a lot of the PC clones and stuff, where they were just using whatever was the cheapest tube that they could buy. Apple really committed themselves to making nice monitors starting around kind of the middle of the Apple II era, for sure. And of course, it also had border effects, which was a very important feature in any kind of technical enthusiast platform, like a lot of the 16-bit ones. My VGA friends were always jealous of that too. I'd show them border effects demos, the FTA Christmas demo and so on, and they were always extremely jealous of that. So, it had a few neat tricks up its sleeve.
It did. I've actually been unrelated to the fact that we're coming on this episode 286, 1986. I got into pulling a box of an old friend's about 70, 80 floppies. He had a GS and did a little coding and this kind of thing. I've been archiving that using I have a CFFA 3000, the hard drive emulator that uses Flash, and moving images over. So I've been playing around with little demos, and I guess I've been using the GS much more than I normally do here in the last 2 days, and so it's been a pleasure. And again, the sharpness and the ease of using GSOS is a pretty nice operating system. Well, when you have an accelerator, which I do, so maybe that's what kind of makes it bearable. But it's been fun. Not a painful process to do that archiving. So
the 2GS had Apple's first color GUI. A lot of people don't know that. The GS had the Finder and all of the desktop stuff in color quite a bit before the Mac ever did. So it has that claim to fame. And I think what's interesting.
Sorry.
And the first ADB, that's right. Yeah, which I spoke highly of the keyboard, but that was one weakness on that keyboard, is the ADB ports on the side of it are really terrible. And it just feels like it's 100% going to break every time you plug something in. So you plug in your mouse once and then never touch it. But it's funny how there's kind of a hardware spec, an impromptu hardware spec for a 16-bit machine that's going to be popular with demo coders. So it has to have certain things. It has to have, palette swapping. It has to have scanline interrupts. It has to have border colors. And the GS kind of hit all those bullet points. It wasn't very good at any of those things, but it had all of those features that make a demo machine fun to program, or make a machine that will attract a demo scene. So it had that. And I think that's a lot of where the love of the machine comes from. As the demo scene shifted eventually over onto PCs, the culture and the technology of demos really changed. It really much, because of course PCs are doing everything on the CPU. So it just became about who's got the best fixed point, math routines, and who's read the most graphics gems books and that kind of thing. It stopped being about exploiting interesting quirks in the hardware, like, oh, if I tie this interrupt into that register, I can get the screen to warp in this cool way or whatever. Demos stopped being about that and just started being about who can shove the most polygons into a VGA buffer. And so I think we lost something there, but the GS was definitely in that club for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. Excellent. So what else? There were some other things. So another thing that came up in our chat is the Color Computer 3. And somewhere I have a tab that has the Color Computer 3 in it. Sorry. What I've done is this is very frustrating. So what's happened is that I have gone through my, here it is. Okay. Okay. Yes. Sorry for the distraction. I had been tabbing through and suddenly a YouTube video started playing in my ear, which made it impossible to talk. It's actually also, I think we've probably all seen this, like what happens if you listen to yourself on a lag and try to talk.
It's the worst.
It's impossible.
It's impossible. Yeah.
Indeed.
It is pretty amazing. But yeah, somewhere okay. Anyway, yes. So in the chat, Curtis brought up that the Color Computer 3 was also a 1986 thing. So, and I think I knew that I had opened a tab for it, but that was also part of what made me think, this is the year for incremental advancement.
It was kind of it was the year of like RAM upgrades and like language cartridges and things like that. Everyone was kind of still working on whatever the next 32-bit thing was going to be, I guess.
Yeah. But my understanding is that the Coco 3 is the one you want.
Yes.
If you're not there for just sort of like old artifacts and historical provenance, if you want to use it, this is the one you want. Have any of I have one, I think, yeah. I at least have a 2, but I think I have a 3. Specifically, this is I wanted to try it out at some point, but it's still sitting there waiting for that moment.
I've only ever even seen one once. There was one on the garage giveaway table at Kansas Fest one year, and everybody was talking about it. I forget who grabbed it, but someone did, and that's literally the only one I've ever even seen. This is another very niche computer with a passionate but tiny fan base.
Mm-hmm.
I have one. I have used it. I don't have it. It's one of the few I have that is kind of tucked away under the desk on a shelf, ready to pull out, but I don't have it fully set up for quick, easy, always access. It's arguably and I've said this many times before, I think, whenever we talk about it, but arguably the most powerful 8-bit computer, I think, with its 6809E. But I picked one up on eBay. Then I found a RAM upgrade, upgraded it to its 512K. It has interesting ability to, it doesn't have slots, but Radio Shack made a kind of they called it the multi-pack interface. You can put multiple cartridges in, but it's not just like, all those, multi-cartridge things you see for the C64 with the switch. They can be accessed simultaneously, if you access them with an address. That's the one the four port one that's being shown on the YouTube live stream right now. As I understand it, on the Coco 3, the interface is flipped, so you have to do some hardware modifications to actually get it to connect. Oddly, more recently, I picked one up with two slots or cartridge bays, whatever as you might call it. 3D printed is a recent build to get serial along at the same time as. I guess it was something else I was using at the same time. But anyway, it's a fun system, and it's OS 9 operating system, which runs on the 6809. That was, you may recall, the lawsuit. Apple sued, or they sued Apple, I guess, for the use of OS 9 when Mac OS 9 was around, and I think that got settled or something long ago. But it's a pretty powerful windowed multitasking operating system, and I think people began to realize that the Coco 3 is actually more powerful than any of Radio Shack's Z80 based business machines. It's a more powerful system, and the operating system's much more advanced. And another quirk worth mentioning is there's a Hitachi chip. They made a 6809 compatible that had a great deal of additional features that weren't. I know some of them weren't documented. Maybe all of them weren't documented, but the OS 9 operating system will detect and utilize that faster chip and its advanced features. So you really can do some impressive. It's an impressive system to mess around with when fully expanded. Way beyond, I think, what most people who went into Radio Shack and bought one were doing with it. But I always wish that I spent more time with it, that I had easier access to programs, and maybe I will at some point, because I feel like I'm missing out on some kind of a gem that's in there without digging really deep into it. So, but it's and the Coco 3 certainly. With its enhanced video, it has 320 by 200, 16 colors out of a 64 color palette like EGA, but it's a lot beyond the Coco 2 or the original Coco. So you can do things that edge towards GSST territory, but it's a good little ways lower than that. But it's fun and a very unique little system, I think.
If I'm not mistaken, it's the only system that you ever used the 6809. Is that right? Which is, by all accounts, the technically best 8-bit CPU that was ever made. I think there's little debate about it in terms of technical prowess. Yes. But I think the Coco 3.
Correct.
Yeah. So if you want a 6809 system, this is your only choice. Which it's kind of a shame that chip didn't get more use, because it is a really amazing chip. I think it was expensive. I think that's why it didn't take off more than it did. But yeah, amazing chip. It's really the chip that enables OS 9, as impressive as it is. You got to have hardware support for all the cool stuff that OS 9 does.
I think the Vectrex had one.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just looked that up because I think I famously misspoke and a few episodes ago claimed that the Vectrex had a Z80 at its heart. So I was cautious.
However, that was edited out, I think.
Yes, I remember. And now you've got to edit this out.
Yeah.
I'll mention this again.
Yes.
This is our new thing.
Well, now I want to see an OS 9 port to the Vectrex. That should be possible.
Yeah. Use a light gun as a mouse.
Yeah, exactly. It'll vector draw the GUI, all flickery and fast as it can.
Would be great to use that for the keyboard. There was a million years ago, there was some kind of onion type joke of the new Apple. I forget what it was called, but it was like the click book or something.
It was the Mac wheel.
Right.
Yeah, it's one of the best things the Onion's ever produced. That video is. Yeah. My God, my sides hurt from laughing at that video. Yeah. They have all these on the street interviews with people who have tried it, and they're like, I never realized how much I hated typing. And the guy's typing an email, and it's just scrolling from letter to letter. It's hilarious.
I must have missed that one, sadly.
Yeah, Google Mac wheel,
right.
And you'll find it. It's MacBook with the entire keyboard and trackpad replaced with the original iPod click wheel. Yeah,
Just one big click wheel.
just making fun of Apple's insistence on simplification at the expense of all else.
Yeah.
I think that came out around the time that they announced they were getting rid of the headphone jacks, or maybe it was in response to the getting the iPhone not having a physical keyboard or something. It was triggered by some Apple product release that was missing or had removed some feature that everyone was convinced would be stupid to live without.
Right.
But it's very, very well done. It's very funny.
There was one other thing that I saw in the so there's a number of other 1986 things, but this one I thought this was interesting. So the IBM personal computer started with the 5150, and then they went on to make the XT, which is I guess the 5162. Is that right? But there, and then after that there was the AT. So the 286 came out, and they went to the IBM AT, and there was a slightly different shape, a little boxier. But there was a 286 version of the XT, which I only just learned about quite recently.
Really?
So there is a XT 286. Okay, so that's the 5162. So if for some reason you didn't want to get an AT, maybe it was too expensive at the time. They're still expensive. I don't know why, but you could have gotten an XT that had a 286 in it, and that was a 1986 innovation.
Huh. Interesting.
And I see it's on the YouTube article that you're showing in the stream. It has this little factoid that I found rather interesting, and was going to mention it's actually faster than the AT in some capacities because its RAM is 0 wait state rather than whereas there are some wait states in the AT RAM, which I think it's kind of cool. I always thought the XT was a much nicer looking system than the AT, so I was kind of team AT on those two. I mean team XT on those two.
What's funny to me about this period of IBM is that they were just creating standards but never actually selling computers. Like they created the XT and then the AT and PS2, and all these different things, but they couldn't manage to sell computers to save their lives. But all of the clones were just instantly adopting all of these standards. So nobody bought everybody had an AT for a while, but nobody had an IBM PC AT. Everybody had a Dell or a whatever gateway or whatever. But I just thought that's funny that IBM for 15 years just created standards, never made any money.
Yeah, Compaq
maybe businesses bought them. I feel like I remember seeing some IBM XTs and ATs in offices and that kind of thing. Never
institutions, bought them. Companies and schools, like our school, my high school had a PS2 lab that some salesman talked our school district into that I'm sure cost a freaking fortune. That we weren't even really allowed in because it was too expensive. They kept it locked, and we had to get special permission to go in and use it because they were all gleaming in there in their IBM-ness. But I think that's who bought them for sure. Okay.
Yeah, I think Compaq actually beat. It might have been just by days, but as far as a 286, they actually beat the AT itself out the door. Like they were on sale, I think, a month before the AT actually landed, having seen the spec and gone from there, as I recall. But the Desk Pro 286, which I can't even remember what the insane price was of that thing, but it was ludicrous.
Yeah, I actually used a real AT because businesses bought them. I worked for a hotel. I was like one of a little group of programmers that worked at this hotel, and the owner was an early adopter. So this was, I've mentioned him before because he was also the one who got the Bernoulli drives and things like this. So
interesting.
So yeah, so I have kind of like a soft spot for the IBM AT for just pure nostalgic reasons, and actually because it was, I guess we had an XT, like a regular XT, and then the AT, and I always wanted to get there. I always wanted to be there when I could claim the AT because it was so much faster.
They were nice looking machines, I think. Like they had a very professional, institutional kind of look to them. They were much nicer looking than all of the clones, which were just sheet metal boxes with a bunch of components shoved in them. The IBM machines were nice looking.
So what else? Let's see. 1986 also brought us the, don't know if there's much to say about this, but the Internet Message Access Protocol was adopted, I guess, defined something in 1986, which I guess has a baseline effect on us. I guess actually, for me, the switch between POP and IMAP was definitely, I don't know, eventful.
Yeah.
Different way of thinking about things.
Yeah, well, and it signaled a shift, but from intermittent internet connection to always there internet connection, right? Like POP was a good solution for dial-up, where you had to dial in and download your email and then disconnect because you were getting charged by the minute or whatever. But IMAP was sort of like a sign of like you'd made it, because now you have full-time internet connection, and so you can afford to just pull for your email as much as you want. That was kind of neat, I thought.
And on multiple machines. I mean, like the truth lived somewhere else.
Yeah. And you didn't end up with 12 copies of all of your email, because everywhere that you logged in, it downloaded another copy of your email, and then and none of it was synchronized. It was all local state. So you just have all your old drafts sitting on every other computer and stuff.
It's interesting because at this point in time, I was on BBSs and things, but I wasn't really using email as we have it today. Like my first actual email was 1989. And I definitely know that at that point, sometime there in the early 90s, I used POP before I used IMAP. And maybe the reason why is, as you're saying, that it was that thing of dialing in somewhere, fetching your email versus being online all the time.
Yeah, I used POP well into the late 90s because I didn't have a continuous internet connection until probably 99 or 2000, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a sort of one might, this will surprise nobody, but I have a kind of a hoarder neurosis that makes me feel like I don't want it to live somewhere else. I want it to live right here on this machine.
Yeah,
I want to be able to back it up at 7 different locations.
Yeah, POP did have a simplicity to it that was kind of nice. Like IMAP was sort of scary and confusing at first, because it's like, where is my email? It's synchronizing it somehow, but in a way that I don't really understand. Like POP was like, for those of us who grew up on BBSs, POP made sense. Like I log in, I download a big thing, and then I disconnect, and this thing is my email. Like that just had a cleanliness and an easy to understandness to it that IMAP never did. I mean, even today, like
For sure.
I'm synchronizing my Gmail with my Apple Mail client through IMAP, and it does weird things all the time, and I don't understand it. Like sometimes it makes 6 copies of a draft that I'm typing, and I don't know why it does that.
Yeah, I remember I used to, when the handheld started landing, I had one of the first Windows CE keyboardless units, and I remember I was working on site, a government contract, and you could go into the fax machine rooms. They had actual phone lines that you could use without a code, and so I'd plug in my handheld, and it would download the chunk of POP mail, disconnect, be connected for like 5 seconds, and then leave, because we weren't really supposed to be using those fax machines like that, and then sit down and read your email at lunch, respond, and go back and plug it in. Yeah, it felt, as you said, for a BBSer, that made perfect sense.
Yeah, as you say, it was also helpful for someone who may or may not have been unknowingly using the dial-in internet of a past employer. I'm not going to say who that might have been, just speaking for a friend here, but for a couple of years, this friend might have been using the dial-up internet because they didn't change the passwords or phone numbers. And so it was very helpful to be online as little time as possible, so as not to be noticed.
There you go.
Theoretically, I mean, that may have happened to somebody somewhere.
In theory.
Right. A couple of other things that came up when I looked for 1986 were, this surprised me a little bit, and so maybe it's false, but SCSI 1 was attributed to 1986.
Really?
Is that possibly that late? No. Okay.
Yeah,
so designed 81.
81. Oh,
standardized in 86. Okay.
Okay. I was going to say that has to be earlier than that, huh?
Yeah. Part of why I was surprised by that was just that it's got the same date as IDE. So IDE was 1986. So parallel ATA.
I believe, and maybe this is something I think I came in on a conversation at the start of the show. The Mac Plus, I think, was also 1986. And as I recall, and I found this out because I went through 7 spinning hard drives before I could get one that I could get working on my Mac Plus when I acquired one in the early 2000s. It had SCSI, but its hardware was finalized slightly before the SCSI spec itself was finalized, and so it's kind of loosely SCSI. And so I literally had went through. They weren't unusual, Fujitsu, IBM, Seagate, different drives, but it took a long time before I found one that would play nice with that Mac Plus, because it's not quite SCSI, and that was 86.
Yeah.
And to come full circle, my GS was also my first exposure to SCSI. I got a hard drive with that machine, and it was my first hard drive. And it was a SCSI monster with a huge steel enclosure that I bought from another dude on a BBS. And it was a 40 megabyte drive. And there was the one really good SCSI card for the GS that everyone wanted. Ramfast Revision C or something. SCSI card, and I forget the exact name of it, but there was this one SCSI card that if you had that one, you were a big deal. And so I was very proud to have that specific, the good SCSI card. And that hard drive still works. It's still downstairs connected to my GS as we speak. It sounds like a jet engine when you fire it up. But, it still works.
Nice.
Yeah, the one thing that I really kind of like about now switching back to IDE is that it persists. Like, I mean, I'm still amazed that like the CF card is just like a little IDE drive. Like you can plug it straight into an IDE like connector, and it just works,
which is very handy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
A common hack that I did to early iPods was you swap out that, early iPods had a tiny hard drive in them, and you could swap it out with a CF card because it was an IDE drive, and then your iPod was solid state, which was a little hack that you could do all the way up to the second generation iPad mini. They were still using actual mechanical spindles in those things. Mm-hmm. They weren't, people assume they were flash memory, but they actually weren't. They had tiny little hard drives in them, and you could swap them out. Make it much more robust.
So did they have actually sort of like gyroscopic resistance?
I mean, they were very good little hard drives. You could probably still buy them. I mean, they were the same form factor as a CF card, but they were tiny hard drives. I think they were made by Hitachi or something. And at the time, if you wanted above a certain size of CF card, this was the only way to do it. CF cards weren't that big yet. So they had to use these little hard drives. But what that meant is that when bigger CF cards came out, you could literally swap it. There was a connector on it and everything. So you could literally swap it in 5 seconds and get rid of the little spinning disc. But it's a marvel of technology, those tiny little hard drives that were the same form factor as a CF card.
Yeah, you might recall seeing whenever you encountered a compact flash, like a handheld or laptop, whatever, that would take a compact flash card, it would mention type 1, type 2, and then there was the elusive type 3. And the difference was the amount of clearance for the bulk height on that thing. And the type 3 was needed for that mechanical. And it's only very slightly thicker. It's not like some crazy, it's just one more little equal advancement in millimeterage. But yeah, and you could buy those things and use them if you had a type 3 support. Yeah. Fascinating to me, but they were so microscopic.
Yeah, I'm still stuck on this idea that if it's a spinning thing, then it's going to have a sort of gyroscopic effect. And so I was wondering if like your iPod would stand up on its own if it's on.
like it's hard to turn it in your hand because it's like resisting. Yeah. No, the mass of it is so low that you wouldn't feel that. But
it is pretty fun though when you take it. I guess when you pick up a drive that is not quite done spinning.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and you can't
feel it.
Yeah, you can't twist it. Yeah, because it stabilizes. Yeah.
We need to see a video. iPod in weightlessness. Let's see where it goes. It stabilizes.
Actually, it might. I mean, if in orbit where there's no gravity, it might be enough spinning mass to stabilize it. and as far as I know, they never had any issues with them crashing or anything. Like, because I think most people had no idea their iPod had a tiny hard drive in it. So I don't think they had any. I think the technology was sufficiently good that they had zero issues with them. I never heard of one crashing, but yeah, that's pretty amazing that they can get a hard drive into that little form factor.
I guess the arms would be so short, even being thin, they would just be rigid. I mean,
yeah, I don't know.
Oddly strong compared to the
Yeah, I'd love to see someone dissect one and just see how they worked inside. It's like the 90s version of 80s cars, 80s talking cars that had tiny little record players in them. Like if you had an 80s Nissan and if you open the door, it would say the door is open. The way they didn't have speech synthesis in those cars, what they actually did was it was a tiny little record player, and then there was playing the sounds.
Wow, that's crazy.
And if you Google tiny record player talking 80s cars, you'll find it.
As one does.
As one does. Yes.
Yeah. And those things are sought after now because, again, it's one of those technologies that people can't believe ever existed because it just seems like a ludicrous way to do that. But it really was the easiest and cheapest way to do it at the time because, they didn't have flash memory or voice synthesizers or, recorded audio samples. Like all that stuff we take for granted didn't exist in 1985.
Yeah, and Christopher in the chat says that he says I think people were buying iPod minis just for that, just to harvest the hard drive out of them.
Yeah, I believe it.
I remember stories of people doing this, and then finally they were starting to get caught on the early. I don't know how many iPads, but on the first one, at least you could connect it as a FireWire drive. Storage drive, and so people would roll into CompUSA and plug it into an iMac and start copying commercial software onto their iPod to take home, and use. And I had a friend that did it, and it worked fine. But that's another little use case, I guess.
Yeah, I definitely used it for the sort of legitimate version of that, like as a sort of like an emergency. Restore drive or whatever, but that did seem pretty wild. That like this is actually a hard drive as well as a thing you can play whatever the dumb little games are on. And I had one. I never had one that was old enough not to have the sort of video capability. I forget what it's like 5.5G or something. There was some generation number that it had where it got video.
Yeah, I think they called it the iPod Video when it first came out. I don't know if it's is my screen share working? So I'm showing.
Yes.
No, it is.
Okay, so yeah, this is the phonograph unit that was in a lot of 80s cars that had the talking voices. So it's it's just on the in the car, it just looks like a black plastic box, like any other random plastic module inside a car that you find. But inside it was actually a tiny little phonograph record. And it was actually like an Edison
vinyl record?
So it's like an Edison cylinder, actually. You can see it here.
Okay.
The white thing on the top left is the actual record. And then you can see the little phonograph arm here. So it was a record player, and it had the ability to seek. So it would, it could play like 10 different sound files or whatever. So when you open the door, when the fuel was low, it would seek to the right track to play the fuel low sound. Yeah. Anyway. That's
cool. And you could conceivably record, you could localize it, put it in the language of the target country.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. This is sort of on topic. Like my mom's 84 and 88 Nissans both had this in them. So it is sort of, I'm sure they had them in 86 as well. Yeah.
I feel like when we talked about it before, I know that I'm sure I had the same thought because immediately I think this is going to skip sometime. The door is it.
That's what made me think of it. It's an idea that you think can't possibly work, like in that environment. You're like, you can immediately think of 10 reasons that's going to be terrible, and somehow they solved all those problems, and it works. And there's as far as I know, there was no issues with them. So. Similar to the hard drive, like putting a tiny hard drive into an iPod just seems like a ridiculous idea, but they made it work and it was flawless. So who knows? But
I think that like with those Edison spools, the arm moves at a fixed rate. So like the records we have on record players, like that thing is just floating, and however however spaced the tracks are is determines how fast. But like on the Edison ones, like it's going to always move the same. So like it shouldn't really have a skipping problem. I guess the one thing could be if the actual like cylinder itself becomes shifted or skewed somehow, then you're going to get the totally wrong things.
Yeah.
But it should always like cover like this amount of time is always going to cover what we think is this length of track time on the spool, I guess.
Yeah, and the cylinder I think made it easier to do the random access, because on a record that's very difficult because it's a variable, velocity spiral. But in a vertical cylinder, you can just move up some fixed amount. There's probably a little stepper motor in there or something that's just moving it up by, exactly 1/8 of an inch, and that's going to be, track 2 or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's a much easier problem. It's also just a better form factor to put in a little module.
Yeah. I'm sure they got the spec for this, and I'm sorry, I keep interrupting here. One more detail.
No, it's okay.
I'll throw back to you in a second. But yeah, I'm sure they got the spec for this and thought, like, how are we going to make this thing say these messages? And then someone came up with this idea, and then they laughed for a whole afternoon.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems impossible. Just like, but I remember I ran, I guess the first blog of any note I ran was iPod Hacks. It was a blog about the iPod. Ran it for like 9-10 years or something like that. But I remember, therefore, I tracked iPod news rather closely. It was just me. But there was, it's gone now, long gone. But I remember around the same time as people were, becoming sneaker pirates and going into CompUSA with their iPod hard drive, you could also install an operating system. You could boot from this thing. Like you could put Mac OS, and I don't remember if it was people trying betas of Mac OS 10 that was coming out. I can't remember where exactly it was in the time frame 2001, but Apple actually put out, there were all these failures happening of the drives in these things. And while they're rugged, I don't think there was any physical issue with dropping, and the arms were rugged. The seek action of an operating system, that was swapping, was running these drives down. And so if you used it as I think Apple's, it didn't seem like they were really reining you in too hard, like unreasonably hard, by saying, please do not install Mac OS as a boot volume, using your iPod as a boot volume. This can lead to wear and tear. I think that it just wasn't up for that kind of seeking, as one could imagine. And so there were some failures there. I remember writing about that a few times.
That's interesting, actually. That's a really good point. The hard drives may have survived as well as they did because it was a limited use case. Yeah, you weren't thrashing,
just moving that head, reading a song, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Even jumping around a little bit wasn't much, but if you're writing to swap and going crazy,
operating systems are much harder. On a hard drive.
Yeah, it's just
than a music player would be.
So I wish I could. I'm going to have to now dig and see if I can find online somewhere the text of Apple's warning on that. It had to have been 2001. No, 2002, because it came out at the end of 2001. Anyway.
Yeah, and I think that would have been right around the time when OS 10 was starting, right? I mean, like that's when the
lots of
betas were out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Rhapsody and all that was moving towards what we have. Yeah.
And I did install one of those, like developer preview 1 or whatever. I still somewhere have these disks, and I remember thinking, oh no, because everything was slow, everything was crashing.
Yeah,
this is like, I don't want this to be the future.
Yeah.
The next was faster than this.
Yeah, it ran pretty weakly on the systems that existed when those betas were happening. It seemed like once they got to the G4 and the G5, then things were a lot better. But yeah. I remember I did that too.
Same. It was tough times.
Yeah.
Guess I was lucky. My first OS 10 was Jaguar, and by Jaguar it was extremely well sorted, and I was extremely impressed with it. Like everything, it was so fast and so tight, and everything worked really well. And that was during that period. Apple actually, they had a mandate that every release had to be faster than the previous one. So when you upgraded to Lion or Leopard or Snow Leopard or whatever, it actually got faster on older hardware.
Right.
They stopped doing that noticeably sometime not too recently, but for a while there, it was pretty amazing. They just kept getting better and better.
That's I wasn't aware of that, although sometimes I hoped for it, that, like having given more time to optimize things would be better. But because it does seem like that's against the pressure of sales, right? I mean, like what you want is for this to be the reason you buy a new machine.
Yeah. So up to about Snow Leopard, I think that was official policy, that it had to be faster on existing hardware every time by some benchmarks that they had. But they quietly dropped that requirement sometime after that. And now they just add AI to everything.
Yep.
All right. Let's see. So I think I didn't have anything else that was in the 1986 list that I had put together. Any other thoughts?
Nope.
I had looked at it myself. I found mostly the same kind of things that you did. I think there was one thing I found. I think I saw mention that the 101 key, like PC keyboard standard, also first appeared in 1986, which is interesting. I would have thought that was sooner, but
well, that's a big deal too. I mean, that certainly runs our lives now. That's become the standard. So.
But yeah, otherwise it feels like it was kind of a boring year. It's like a year we had to get through. I don't know. At the same time, I think looking back, I was 15, and so I was still doing computers, but I was also had other things on my mind too, and just like, I don't know. I think I just there's nothing that I can think of that's like, oh man, I remember this thing I did in 1986 with whatever computers I was using. Like, I'm sure there was something, but I can't think of what.
Ferris Bueller's Day Off came out that year, so maybe we were just at the movies.
Yeah, exactly. Wow. Yeah, Matthew Broderick at the height of his power. Yeah. Ferris Bueller in War Games, kind of in short succession there. Jeez, he was on top of the world there for a minute.
Karate Kid 2, 1986.
Yeah, The Golden Child. I remember. I don't know if anybody knows The Golden Child. It was a Eddie Murphy movie.
Eddie Murphy.
But
the scene with the porridge and the blood in it, that's etched in my brain. Yes. That freaks me out to this day. Oof.
I don't remember that. I don't think I've seen that movie since 1986. So I don't.
Yeah, the thing was to defeat this golden child, to take away his power, they had to get him to eat blood. So they were feeding him all of this stuff that had blood in it to try and get him to eat it without realizing it. And anyway, that is a very slightly gruesome scene that when I was 11 was extremely dramatic.
Yeah, the thing about that part of the reason I kind of felt like maybe this wasn't well known is because I saw it at like a preview screening, like before it actually came out, because I would always call these radio stations, whatever the contest line, and I'm sure I've said this before, but we had, I think, 4 different phone lines in our house. I would set up a couple of different phones, and I would be like caller 1 and 7 and 9. But, so I would keep, and I would win them so often that I would have to claim to be other people, because I was within the window where I couldn't keep winning. So my friends would have won the Golden Child tickets. But
I'd heard there were people that did that. Now I've met one, so that's fascinating. And for our younger viewers, radio was a thing where you bought a box and you put it in your house and it played commercials at you.
Yeah, that's right.
And then whatever 10 songs were popular over and over.
Occasionally music.
With people talking over them.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of contests. So many contests.
Paul Simon, Graceland. Peter Gabriel, so.
I think we're digging now.
Okay, we're good. Yeah. We're good. I'm done.
Yeah. I mean, we managed to talk for an hour about 1986, so it can't have been that dull.
Yeah. There was some stuff.
Yeah.
Thumbs up.
There. We approve of 1986.
Yeah.
Look forward to 1987. There was one piece of listener feedback that I think I will mention, which is from Andy, and he pointed out that this thing called shader glass, he thought it was very cool, and I didn't know about it, so I thought I would see if anyone else did. But from what I understand, it's a Windows only thing, but it's basically just like an overlay that you can drive around on your screen to make it look as if it's coming out on a CRT. So
that is very cool.
Yeah, that's neat.
I love that. That's awesome. That's really cool.
That's a great effect. I didn't know Windows had the ability to do that. I don't think you could do that on the Mac because it would require reading video memory.
Yeah, you get those alerts about monitoring.
Yeah, like that. You wouldn't be able to get the permissions for one app to read the screen of another app like that. I don't think. Maybe
I don't think
possible.
so either. I know that it used to be possible years and years ago. I made a Mac screensaver, a Mac OS 10 screensaver that would it would actually draw itself on top of the display you had, and the way you could do that was that you could actually capture the whole frame buffer. And then at some point, some OS release that just stopped working entirely. It just vanished. And so it just became a black screen instead.
Yeah, on my my OS 7 Mac OS 7 machine, I had one of those plugins that made like cats walk around like on the tops of your windows and stuff. Yeah, same deal. It was like pulling all of video memory to figure out where your windows were. But and again, at some point they improved security and those extensions all stopped working. But this is neat. This is really neat.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So if you have an emulator that doesn't itself implement CRT shaders and you want to sort of get an original experience, you can just take this and drag it over the window if you are using Windows at least.
And one thing I noticed, I've kind of played around with these kind of things in emulators before. That some have the scan line options, and I always kind of felt sort of meh about it. Like I think back in the day when I was a kid, like I would have loved to have things be more crisp as much as possible.
Yeah.
But then recently I was given this Atari 400 Mini as a Christmas gift, which is really cool. It's just an emulated Atari 8-bit with built-in HDMI and with USBs. You can pop in a USB memory stick on a micro SD or whatever. Play every game that exists. And when I turned that on, I found that some of the games, like since you're dealing with these like big swaths of the same color, it can actually be kind of hard on a big. It's like I have a 65-inch television or whatever, so it can be hard to sort of navigate your way visually from one side of the screen to the other and realize, okay, where am I? What's in line with what? But if you turn on the scan lines, suddenly it's like, oh, I suddenly see it.
Yeah.
So I think the existence of scan lines, which seemed to be like back in the day, I felt it was ugly. It's actually the existence of them is a kind of a requirement for some types of being able to visually navigate vertically on the screen where something is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and a lot of retro console gamers use CRTs because a lot of and we've talked about this before, but the artwork on console games was very specifically designed around CRTs.
Right.
Yeah. So the way they color bleed and so on. So a lot of early Nintendo games, you look at them on a perfect LCD and the graphics all look weird because they're relying on the characteristics of the machine, of the display. Yeah, I like scan lines. I'm not a huge fan of the curvature effects of CRT emulation because I'm sort of like you, Jack. Like I hated the curvature and the weirdness of the CRTs, and I think like we all grew up with them, so your brain kind of maps that away. So at the time, you didn't really notice it so much, but now that we're all used to flat, perfect LCDs, when I go back to a CRT, it just looks like I'm looking through a fisheye lens on a camera, and it's really hard for me to get past that. Like my brain won't compensate for that anymore the way that it used to.
Sounds like you're an aperture grill gal.
Yes.
Those flat Trinitron, Diamondtron. You get the scan lines, but not so much the curving. At least not usually.
Yeah, if I'm playing games in an emulator, I will sometimes turn on the scan line feature, but I don't like the CRT curving stuff.
Cool. All right. And at some point we'll catch up on feedback. But that's the one for today. So thank you.
That's a good
so
one.
Now, so now we can move to items of interest and news. And Blake, you have the first of these.
Yes, let me share my screen. So the item I ran across appealed to me because let's see if everyone can see. Appealed to me because I was a big fan of the original game, Myst. I quite enjoyed it when it came out. I played it on PC. I'm going to pause and comment on the stream. I'm not seeing what's happening on the stream correspond with what's happening on my browser. So let me try to redo that.
Okay.
Maybe sorry, just apologize for the glitch.
Perhaps you shared the different tab.
I see what I did. I did the right. I did this the tab instead of the window. Here we go. Okay, I think we're probably better off now. Yay. Okay, so yes, Myst from Cyan. I enjoyed the game when it came out. I played it. I guess it was 94 or so on PC, on Windows, but on the original release, it was created on the Mac, released on the Mac initially. It was a HyperCard stack. Basically, it was written in HyperCard. It had some modifications. I think Apple even worked with them a little bit on some modifications, shims. There was video that could be triggered, but it was a HyperCard stack. And so this is an effort by a person who's, I'm going to botch the name, Guillaume Lafoulet, I believe. That's as good as I can do. Created basically a map. Since HyperCard is a series of cards within the stack, and they're related in certain ways, loopbacks, link forwards, and different metadata. This individual basically created dug into the code. It was inspired by some reverse engineering work that others had done, and created a visual map of the paths, the links, the clusters, the HyperCard terminology, and it's a very technical deep dive. I can't really do justice to trying to explain this in a nutshell, but it reveals every possible location that one could get through in standard means in the game, showing different node weights. And I never created any HyperCard stacks. I wasn't a HyperCard guy, so I don't have any knowledge of some of the technical pieces that they're talking about. But it gets into the weeds here for sure, and probably is appealing if you are just curious what might be under the hood. There was a follow-up to this. And there's the actual graph, which is visually pleasing, and it's presented here. There's a PDF, a large-scale PDF one can download and print or use as a background, and it shows the entire game as you might move through it, depending, doing the different choose your own adventure style jumps from one area to another. There was a follow-up where they went further, looking at different aspects deeper into the code. I think looking at the article here, talking about shortest theoretical paths between existing nodes on the map, and revealing some areas, basically some paths and areas that one typically couldn't really get to in the game, but that the map and the interconnections allowed. So in a way, sort of revealing sequences and places that you really couldn't see or get to, sort of hidden areas. I don't think we're talking about islands of nothing so graphical and fanciful as that, but it's just places that you couldn't normally reach in playing the game as one would play the game. So it seems quite interesting. I read through the first article, scanned the second. I actually came through this. I found this in a third article by Andrew Plotkin, and they noticed this effort, and shortly after followed up with their own digging into. He was interested in finding the browsing the HyperTalk scripts, which is a portion of the overall HyperCard quote code of the game, and created a HyperCard stack extractor on his own, and goes into a few other aspects that were revealing what was under the hood. So basically 3 articles that are pretty interesting and very, very technical, and we'll can link those in the notes, and I found it very enlightening. So that is my item of interest and news today.
It's interesting that this, like, I'm kind of, because this is all sort of like after the fact analysis, it might actually be revealing things that the creators weren't particularly aware of. Like, this is not necessarily how they thought of it when they created it. Like, I'm wondering if we're learning things, in a sense, maybe finding bugs they didn't know they had, the places that you can't get to.
I think you're right. I think I got a kind of a feeling for, right, this is being looked at in a way that one really couldn't look at the totality of the game, as far as the connections of the nodes. So I don't think there were any tools where they could have set back and seen this at the time, which makes it even more interesting. When I was reading it, I was curious if we'll hear any feedback, from the Miller brothers, who created the game. That would be interesting to hear some input on that. But yeah.
The program is called Demystify, which I almost kind of feel like the project was backported from the name. It's like, all right, well, now we've got to make something that this does because it's such a good name.
I don't think I realized Mist was this big. Like, that graph is huge, like enormous. Absolutely huge. I guess, each of those nodes is not really a location, right? It's like a game state, right? Like, so like every rotation angle within each location and so on is a node, I guess. So but still it's huge.
I think it looks like looking at some of there's a zoomed in section where it's, wood path 2 north, farther out 2 open, wood path 2 south. I don't know if there are various colors here, and I don't know if only certain colors are actual places and others represent, choice, decision splits, but it does look huge. And
I'm assuming that like where it says wood path 2 north and wood path 2 south, I'm assuming those are the same location, but like different or different facings. Because in Mist, perhaps. You could turn into
you can turn
discrete like steps, and then some areas you could move forward or back a discrete step or two within the same location. So those would be different states. So it's kind of like, different states, game states, but not necessarily locations. But regardless, it's huge. It's so much bigger than I would have thought.
Mm-hmm. And it was mentioned that some of the inspiration here, there's some famous Mist maps or sections of the game that people had in the past, it looks like, mapped out, not so much with, node extractors into the code, but I guess looking at different states as they observed them. Anyway, apparently this was a pursuit for a number of people that really got into the game. And it's such a very technical dive that I myself need to read it again. And I want to read the second article fully a few times to try to understand it. But it is kind of mind-boggling. So
cool. Yeah, I imagine this is much more meaningful to people who have actually sort of like solved Mist, which I don't think I ever did. I think I sort of played through it a bit, and then there were other things to do.
Yeah, that was me too. I played it for 20 minutes, and I was like, "Well, this is neat, but I don't feel like I'm getting anywhere, and this is not really for me." But it certainly is pretty.
I made it through, but only because my very bright girlfriend at the time helped me with it, and I think we got through it in 17 hours. But she was much more savvy than I at this thing. But that said, I'm still boggled by this map, so I don't think that provides any insight that I can see. But
okay, then we can move on to the next thing, and that is Jack's.
Yeah, I've got a couple of things that popped up quite recently. One of them is a Polish engineers created a postage stamp-sized Atari 8-bit computer. So I think we talked about this before. In the late 80s, early 90s, Jack Trammell, who was from Eastern Europe, became interested in trying to sell, I guess, probably at that time, old stock of Atari 8-bit computers that were lying around to Eastern Europe. And so, in these days when like the wall had just fallen, that sort of thing, I think I know for sure Poland, a lot of Polish people. And so today there is still an active, like a different sort of Atari 8-bit game developer demo scene in Poland than there is anywhere else in the world, as far as I know. So what someone has done is made an FPGA implementation of a tiny Atari 8-bit computer that does all of the, so not just the CPU, but like the GTIA and the Pokey, all the chips that are on the Atari 8-bit are in some way represented here. So it's an emulator, but it's a hardware emulator because actually every piece is emulated in the FPGA, which is pretty wild. And so there are some pictures and videos of this. What I'm showing right now on the screen is just like the actual bare bones like system itself with no connections to anything. And then in order to actually do anything with it, you put it on top of another board which has little breakout connectors for all sorts of various things. And there are attached, I've found a few different websites, pictures and videos of this thing in action. One example is you can make a tiny little device that is just hanging off the side of a television. Like that's your little 8-bit computer that's hanging off the side of your big TV without sort of like a lot of stuff. And in this case, yeah, it does have a lot of there's some cables and whatnot, but it's all in all a pretty small form factor kind of thing. And somewhere here I saw a mention of that there was some type of movie set. I don't know the details, but someone wrote, for the record, all mechanics on a quote unquote movie set were controlled by modules with an aid on a chip. And so there's a link to an article of that in Polish. But in this, which I have not bothered trying to translate, or I'm sure I can, Google will do it for me. I did find a nice picture of someone having set up their very tiny Atari 8-bit board with the full size keyboard and screen running some software.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I think this is pretty interesting. I guess it's the kind of thing that everyone knows in theory this could be done, but it's neat to see it done in practice instead for a change.
I'm not sure I would have guessed that it could be done this small. I mean, if people need to look at the pictures of this thing, because it is tiny, like it is smaller than a 1x3 Lego brick that he's showing in this picture. Like it is incredibly small.
Yeah,
that's really amazing.
And this is called the Atarino or the Atarino Pico in some instances here. But very cool. And I think I read somewhere that the developer behind this or engineer behind this has been working this for about 10 years. So it's a pretty substantial amount of work to do all of this FPGA coding. I really don't know how that's done at all. So quite cool. Yeah. And I guess, you think about, okay, what is the size of the actual chips in use in my iPhone? Probably similar to this and, a million times more powerful. But this is still a very cool way of taking something that was a real physical thing of a certain size and shrinking it to a whole different size that is not a software emulator. It's a compatible hardware that is a sort of, with the FPGA hardware emulation. Very cool anyway, I think.
That is very cool. That is very cool.
I love that picture of where someone has just basically hung it off of a connector on their television, and it's essentially invisible, like the what was that Google thing that was like a streaming device,
like a Chromecast,
Chromecast, like that, but it's a full retro computer in there. That makes me kind of want one of those for all of my retro computers, so that I can just plug them all into the extra ports on my TV and just have my entire retro collection be invisibly behind my TV. That's a very appealing idea.
Create the retro cat of nine tails with different.
Exactly.
Different
my TV's got like
computer
5
at the end
HDMI ports on it, so I just want one of these on each port, and I'll just switch between them with the source button.
Yep. Nice. And the other thing I wanted to point out was this interesting terminal emulator popped up. It's not new. It is a new release. This version 2.8.0, and it's interesting because the previous release I read was 12 years ago, which is before I was sort of back into any kind of retro computing stuff, so it was never on my radar at all. But pretty interesting. VT 100 and 102 and 52 terminal emulator for the Atari 8-bits. I almost got to the point of actually breaking out my FujiNet, seeing if this would work, but did not try that today. I didn't get around to it. I got busy doing another retro pursuit, which is binging Twin Peaks.
Nice.
But this looks pretty interesting, and there's some accompanying graphics showing a kind of a VT100 torture test demonstration of all the various modes, that sort of thing. It seems to do 80 columns in what looks readable on what normally an Atari 8-bit does not handle a
Yeah.
like you can do.
I was going to ask how that works. I wonder.
I think what they're doing is they're just each character must be a 4x8 pixel graphic.
3 or 4 pixel wide. Yeah.
Yeah. And like I've seen some examples of that sort of thing in games, but I've never really seen it as like a general purpose text mode for the Atari 8-bit, which they seem to have
very
enabled
cool.
here. It does look very
impressive.
cool. It makes me really want to. I really want to set up so that I can expose some TTY from my Mac and telnet into it from my Atari 8-bit and like open up Vim and like sit and do my work on my Mac through my Atari 600 XL or whatever.
Nice.
Will be fun to try.
That's the way to do it.
For 30 minutes.
Yes. Anyway, this is called the Ice-T Ice-T XE is the name of this, and it's on GitHub. It's all open source. Interesting, fun little thing if anybody has an urge.
Cool. Okay, let's see. I think I am next. Yeah, so I'm going to shuffle the order around. I think so. One thing that connects a little bit to what we were just talking about with Myst and so forth is that Bill Atkinson, as we're recording, just like a day or two ago at most, I think, passed away. So, and this is the person who invented HyperCard, right, through which Myst ran, and also a bunch of other things. I mean, I know his name, and I do not know his list of accomplishments particularly, but it was HyperCard, it was MacPaint, it was dithering and FatBits and marching ants, UI elements, and all that kind of like stuff that came in on the Mac graphically. He had a part in.
He was the principal developer on QuickDraw, which was the Macintosh's drawing system as well. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And Lisa
I think
Graph
he did
as
some
well.
work with Lisa before.
Prior.
Also.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think QuickDraw was originally written for the Lisa, and then they had to squish it into the Mac ROM later.
Mm-hmm.
He was also one of the people who, a little later on, I don't know, it said 93 or something like that, went on from Apple to General Magic to make those little what were they called again? But these little General Magic devices, Magic Cap. That was it. The operating system sort of designed around a room or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But and I find those things interesting. I have not played yet with them very much, but it was an interesting. There was in fact a documentary about that. I forget what it was called, but anyway, it might have just been called General Magic. That was sort of talking about their pursuits. But anyway, but most of I think what he's known for is sort of getting the graphics to work well on these the Lisa and then the Mac.
Yeah. Yes, so I think that we are living with the, he's definitely a person who was a big influence in a variety of ways on, both in terms of the Mac software ecosystem, but also HyperCard and the whole, this was like a World Wide Web on your computer before there was a World Wide Web, like it was with the links and that sort of thing, like an actual user approachable hypertext implementation that was actually built into every Mac for a while, or came with every Mac for a while.
Yeah, I mean, it had to have been one of the first consumer. I know there's the mother of all demos and what have you, but this had at least wide scale consumer implementations of a hypertext system. Right? Yeah, it probably was HyperCard, and obviously the web, was influenced by that heavily. Yeah, interesting, and the round Rex that we all know and love.
I was just going to say my favorite interview with him was one where he talked about how difficult it was to get the round rect rendering, because Steve Jobs was absolutely insistent that everything have rounded corners on their Mac and Lisa GUIs. And that was quite a difficult thing to render. And they were already way out of space in the Mac ROM to fit that in there, so that he has a harrowing tale of byte counting optimization where he managed to squish in the extra 150 bytes or whatever they needed to round the corners on all the stupid rectangles. And he was very, very proud of that little algorithm. I thought that was neat.
I remember in Hertzfeld's book, there was an anecdote where Steve Jobs takes Bill Atkinson out into the parking lot and points out everything that is sort of rectangular, but it's rounded. Like the corners of the curb, they're not perfect hard corners; they're rounded, and then the different objects on the fence and things like that. And so he said, so this trying to show him the value. As if really he needed to sell it to Atkinson to make him do it, but he was attempting to sell it. So it's funny.
Yeah. All right. So we can move on from that, but we definitely wanted to mark that. Time is moving on. But okay, so Quinn, you have the next thing.
I do, and this is sort of related to what we were just talking about how IBMs looked nice. So this is an article on Fabian Sanglard's blog, who I'm sure many of our viewers read him. And if you had asked me 3 weeks ago before I read this, if there's any way to be nostalgic about mid-90s PCs, I would have said absolutely no. To me, this whole era of PCs was just completely bland and unremarkable, and I can't ever imagine being emotionally attached to them. Certainly the software, yes. I mean, this was very much the golden age of PC gaming, VGA and Sound Blaster kind of thing. And the hardware, it was whatever, it was commodity garbage, and nobody thought twice about it. Well, I was wrong, and I'm glad to be corrected on this, because Fabian has a multi-part series where he went on a mission to recreate his dream PC from very specifically 1993. And so it's an IBM PS1 with very specific hardware and a very specific keyboard, and everything is very, very specific. And he went to incredible lengths to track down these exact pieces of hardware, and went through the process of configuring it all and building this machine. And honestly, he converted me. Like, now, after seeing his passion for the specifically the hardware, he talks very little about the software in this. It's just like, I wanted this specific keyboard because it was the prettiest. I wanted this specific case version of the IBM PS1 because it had the sliding door that was very pretty, and all of these things. So I was converted to the emotionality that these machines do actually have for some people. So it's a great read. And the other takeaway for it from me was that I think those of us who are not PC people were sort of vaguely aware of how weird and difficult it was to configure PCs. Like, yeah, you had to set IRQs and like memory address locations every time you installed a new card or whatever. It's so much worse than I realized. Like, there were if you wanted a CD-ROM drive, there were 16 different CD-ROM standards on the PCs. Like you bought a Mac, your CD-ROM was SCSI, and you plugged it in and it just worked. The OS knew how to talk to it. PCs had 16 different standards, and they all had different cables and different power connectors and different drivers. And some of them worked and some of them didn't with certain versions of Windows and DOS. And oh my gosh, it's 1,000 times worse than I ever knew it was. So I think I'm actually extra glad now I was not a PC person during that time. But it's really interesting to see him go through this process now, looking back on it, because of course PCs are not nearly this bad nowadays. I really enjoyed this write-up, and by the end of it, you will also be in love with this machine, because his enthusiasm and passion for it really comes through. And I mean, he spared no expense. Like, he specifically went out and found original packaging for everything, and original manuals, and like new old stock, mice and keyboards, and just he went as far as you can possibly go to build the nicest possible, exactly period correct IBM PS1 from 1993. And it's a great read. So recommend.
Wow. Nice.
Very cool. Yeah. I would definitely require some persuading by reading it, because I'm coming in with that same kind of like sort of apathy toward that kind of that era computer. But
yeah, I mean, nobody I knew had a real IBM, for one thing. Everybody just had a Compaq or a Dell or whatever, sheet metal box with a VGA card in it. But so that's part of it. I mean, it's easier to be emotionally attached to these particular IBM machines because they are nice looking. But yeah, I mean, people really did care about them. I think it's I guess it's whatever computer you had at that formative age, somewhere between 12 and 14, you're going to be extremely emotionally attached to, even if it is a stupid plastic beige box. And it's no longer so stupid. So thanks, Fabian, for enlightening me on how people really feel about these machines.
Cool. Okay, I had a quick thing that I just wanted to mention, which is just recently we have, let's see, sorry, let me just get his name here. What is his name? Colin. Anyway, just recently there's been released a Shuffle Puck Cafe game for the Apple II. And so I think anyone who is sort of in that Mac era of the 1993-ish, 1991, I don't know. I'm not sure when it came out, but this was, at least in my experience, everywhere. People played this. It was a fantastic game. Everybody loved this on their 9-inch Macs. Who here is familiar with Shuffle Puck Cafe?
For sure. Yeah, and there was a 2GS version of it also. The 2GS version is the one
Amiga
that I played the most. Yeah.
Oh, so in the day there was the 2GS one.
There was, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I mean, it was one of the 5 Mac games that everybody played. So it was this and Glider and Dark Castle, like those were the Mac games that you played.
Hmm.
So what we have here, this is at Colino.net, is a port of that to the Apple II, just the non-GS Apple II, the 8-bit Apple II, and it's amazing. And one of the other things that is great about it is that it allows you to play 2 players over like a serial connection, which is not something that you could do before. So so it is possible to put 2 Apple IIs next to each other. They will talk to each other. They will synchronize each other's paddles, which is a technical achievement. I mean, it's been interesting on the Slack, kind of watching that development go.
Yeah, this is amazing. It's incredible how fast it is and how good a port it is.
Yeah, I mean, particularly it looks like what I remember playing on the Mac, but the thing is, it's an Apple II. It's a 1 megahertz machine.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things I'm hoping to do this summer in about a month is to set up a tournament. Multiple people on Apple IIs facing each other in this tournament. So we'll stress test this game soon.
It is awesome. It plays just as fast. I have been watching this on the Slack as well, and I've downloaded recent versions. I haven't encountered the serial updated version, but yeah, the speed, it feels just like the Mac version, the Amiga version, and the GS. It's no slower.
Yeah, the speed is quite amazing.
It's astonishing.
And it could have existed in 1978 or whatever, right?
Yeah, it's running on regular hardware, unassisted.
Yeah. Anyway, so if you haven't checked that out and you have access to an Apple II, apparently, allegedly, it works better even like on real hardware. You need a mouse, but it works best on real hardware, and the emulators are hard to control the mouse with in general. But all right. That's good enough for that. Quinn, you had one other thing. Did you want to talk about that?
I do, yeah. This is sort of like breaking news because it just literally came into my feed this morning while I was doing some other stuff. So this is a video by quite a big channel called Retro Recipes, which I'm sure many of you know. Very charming British fellow who talks all about different retro stuff. And the video is titled, Can We Save Commodore? And it's basically, so he's quite a successful Hollywood dude. I think he's an actor and producer and stuff. He's worked on all those recent Star Wars movies and so on. So he's doing well for himself and has quite an extensive retro collection. And through various means, he became aware that it was possible to buy the Commodore IP. So it's essentially consists of a set of like 40 something patent or trademarks that have all been kept together over the years. This was news to me. So this video talks about his pitch to buy the company, but also it talks about the history of what happened to it after, the Amiga and so on. and it's actually more interesting than I thought. I thought Commodore basically just died with the Amiga, but it turns out the brand actually was bought and sold into various things, and there was a few minor efforts to brand stuff with it, the way that like the zombie Atari continues to sell, garbage with the Atari logo on it. Someone did try to do that for a while with the Commodore logo, but it didn't really work, and so the brand has just basically been stagnant. And for a while, it was owned by an Italian company that was just going around suing everybody who was like making Commodore accessories like the minis and so on. And they were charging licensing fees that were pretty steep. So anyway, the company that currently owns it, I think, is in the Netherlands or something. And they've decided they're tired of it. And so this guy's been talking to them, and he's talking about selling all the trademarks to him. And so that's what this video is about. It's and being a film guy, the video is beautifully produced. It's extremely well done. He's very funny. It's a good watch just for the entertainment of it. It's not a charity, we should say. He is doing this he's building a business out of it. So he wants to be the guy that licenses Commodore, the brand, to various people, but he's going to do it for a lower rate at least. I think the going rate was something like 15 or 20% revenue cut for anyone who wanted to put the actual Commodore logo on their 1541 Ultimate drives or whatever else. So he wants to charge 6.4%, kind of a funny number, of course. So he says that it's not a charity. He's not just going to give it away, but it's at least more accessible to anybody who wants to put the actual logo on their community projects. So I thought that was kind of neat. It's certainly better. It'll be better in his hands than it is in the current owners of it, who are just, like I said, going around charging exorbitant fees and or suing anybody who tries to make an accessory. So that's it's kind of it's unclear so far if there's going to be a crowdfunding component to it or what, or how he's raising the capital to do this or what. If he's just going to self-fund it, I think he might be just using his own funds to do this. But anyway, he's announced this effort with this video. And I just thought it was a fun watch. And like I say, if you're interested in the history of the Commodore trademarks, it's actually a lot more interesting than I thought it was. All the different companies that owned it over the years and all the things that have happened to it, I had no idea about. So it's worth watching just for that. And if you're a Commodore person, it's good to know what's going on with the brand these days.
Yeah, that's interesting. In the chat, Tron DD mentioned that there was a Commodore smartphone. In fact, I think I vaguely remember that as well. Yeah, and there was an MP3 player that was branded Commodore for a little while as well. Yeah, there was a couple of attempts to put the brand on some products. I can't remember if this was directly the same issue as connected to the smartphone, or if this was a different ownership because it's Amiga. But at one point, the future of Amiga was going to be, like 10 years ago or 12 years ago, a layer that sat on top of Linux that was effectively Amiga OS as a smartphone platform. And it just seems so bizarre and obscure. And then it just, I don't think it ever even got out the door, but there were some press releases, and I think there was a sample. I don't know if that was connected to this Commodore phone or not, but yeah. Yeah, I should say he talks. Spoiler: the Amiga did not become the standard platform for smartphones. Yeah, he does allude a little bit to that in this video. So this is all these Commodore trademarks and stuff that he's talking about. This does not include any of the Amiga stuff. So all the Amiga stuff is still owned by the Amiga Forever people. That and they also control those brands. They license, but for hobbyists, they actually quote unquote license them for free. So if you want to make an Amiga product that has the actual Amiga logo on it, they will license you that logo for $0. So that's an actual a little more community focused effort than this guy's effort is a little more cynically commercial. At the end of the day, he is trying to make a business out of this and license it, but at least it'll be cheaper than it has been and a little less litigious. But yeah, it does not include the Amiga stuff for what it's worth. I didn't realize that about Amiga and the licensing of its logo. That's nice to hear. Yeah. One thing that was kind of funny for a while, Amiga, he in his history of the trademarks, Amiga was briefly owned by Gateway, which I thought was pretty hilarious. Yeah, I remember. PC cow patterned PC company briefly owned Amiga. So
And then they split it off and they sold the Commodore stuff to different people and the Amiga stuff to different people. It was split off like way back in the day. And that's why they're still separate to this day. But amazingly, all of the rest of the Commodore trademarks have all been kept together over the years, which doesn't usually happen apparently in this kind of situation. All of the different pieces of the IP all get split up and sold off to different groups. But Commodore.
One day we'll all be using Amigas.
Any day now. It's going to happen.
Probably next year.
I do remember having a undeservedly favorable impression of Gateway just due to those boxes. I thought the boxes were just great.
It was incredible branding. It really was. Yeah. It was extremely charming.
Cow boxes.
Yeah. Cows. Yeah.
All right. I think we've made it through the items of interest and news. And so now a word from our sponsor. Okay. Right. All right. And we're back. So today, the host retrocomputing gift idea is a little safety sticker, a little triangle safety sticker that has a picture of a magnet on it to warn you of the things that have magnets in them in your modern life. So this sort of stems from a discussion we were having in the Discord. Blake, do you want to tell us your tale of woe?
Yes. Yeah, unfortunately, I was moving, as I mentioned, archiving some Apple IIgs floppies, and in the same drawer that I keep it, I pulled out a Acorn Archimedes original version of the game Zark or Zarch, which is that David Braben game upon which was based Virus, the game Virus from Firebird. At any rate, so I set it on the table and I was going to put everything else away. And then as I was doing something else, I ended up setting my iPhone 15 Pro on the aforementioned original Zark disk, of which I have no backup and no way to transfer data to that Archimedes because I've never expanded it with any, looked into the serial or terminal programs or whatever. So yeah, that I killed it's not like I played this game every few days, but I bought it to play Zark, and I had the one disc, and I had never copied it because I put it away as soon as I tried it the first time. So now that's gone. And yeah, the MagSafe, the very powerful circular magnet in the back of my phone, that'll do the trick. I mean, I actually don't personally utilize the magnet for anything other than when I set it down and pick it up and find like a needle or a nail stuck to the back.
Exactly.
Magnets. I don't actually use it. I don't have a wireless pad or anything to charge, but it also functions as a floppy disk blanker if you need to do it on the quick. So yeah, thank you. I appreciate it, Paul, for you finding the yellow stickers that I need.
The one that got me was the case for the iPods or AirPods. The AirPods case has a tiny magnet in it that keeps the lid closed. And I set that. I was working on my Apple II, and I set the AirPods case down on a floppy disk and damaged it. Like we were talking about in the Discord, there's just magnets in everything now in a way that there weren't in the 80s, and they're these insane rare earth magnets that they didn't even have in those days. So Paul is showing on the stream his AirPods case with paper clips stuck to it, and it's like in the 2000s. Companies, especially Apple, suddenly decided magnets are the greatest thing ever, and now they're just in everything. Like an iPad has like 15 magnets in the case because there's magnets all down one edge for the smart cover to attach to, and then the face frame all of it has 6 magnets in it that detect when the cover is closed. And so there's just freaking magnets everywhere.
And I actually, I looked around when you mentioned the AirPods. My AirPod case was laying 4 inches to the left of this already blanked Zark disc.
Yeah,
I think the damage has been done. Maybe 4 inches is a safe distance, but yes, I hadn't thought about that either.
I'm getting
really
now.
nervous now.
We're so complacent about magnets that like I wrecked a couple in my retro room before I started being more careful again. I remember we were all back in the day, we were all hyper paranoid about magnets. Like
Oh yeah.
Speakers, and we knew exactly the 4 things in the world that had magnets in them, and were big electric motors. You kept all that. You don't ever put your floppies on top of the washing machine. Things like that. But nowadays you can't avoid magnets, I guess.
I think it actually is a little harder than it seems to destroy the data on the floppy, but it's still risky. I think it was like a Microsoft Word floppy or something on my for my Mac IC30 in college, and I couldn't find it at one point, and I eventually discovered it stuck to the back of my guitar amp speaker. But it still worked. So
Really?
my heart sank when I saw that.
Yeah, my AirPods case didn't erase the floppy. It just damaged it. There was it's got one bad sector on it now or something, but which I suppose, to be fair, might not have been caused by the AirPods, because the discs are 50 years old. But it's hard to say. But yeah, it's true. They're more robust than we give them credit for, but still, scary.
So anyway, the stickers should, if you get these stickers, you should put them on your AirPod and on the little nice little flat writing surface looking space on your laptop.
Yes. Yeah. The front of a MacBook Pro is so tempting to set a floppy down on. Yeah. And there's a big magnet right in there.
I have, it's strange. I'm sitting here laughing. I have a beard trimmer I use to just trim, in the bathroom in the drawer. And it's kind of the junk bathroom drawer with all the things that I don't know why there's a magnet. It has you just plug it in with a barrel type plug at the bottom, but I put it in there and it has a neodymium magnet, and it has bobby pins, needles. Yesterday it had a chain hanging off of it. It's just the strangest thing. I go to trim my beard and I've got this dangling chain, and I can't figure out why this thing has an incredibly powerful magnet. But I think the number of magnets in the world today is too darn high. I'll just leave it at that.
That's right. Yeah. We should write a letter.
Exactly. Which clouds should we yell at about this?
Yeah. Well, luckily, a law. Luckily, Flash is not so affected by it.
Yeah, it's funny. We've talked about that before too. That paranoia is still there. I get nervous putting an SD card down on certain things, because in my head, all storage is still magnetic. So I get nervous about putting SD cards down on certain things.
Yeah. My daughter saw me exactly what you're saying. I'll put my SD card or whatever thumb drive stick in my bag, which has, of course, magnets, a row of magnets to seal it. And I'm cautious. And my daughter's watched me over the years, and she was under the impression, after seeing all this, that flash storage is magnetically vulnerable. She's seen enough of my unnecessary caution to, and she was it was the middle of, she was home for Christmas, and I think she said, well, it came up, and I told her, no, magnets are fine. It doesn't hurt it at all. And she was surprised. So,
You've traumatized your daughter with this paranoia.
Old fears die hard. We need a modern version of the Beagle Brothers, warning sheet on the back of the floppy sleeve to remind us what is and is not dangerous anymore.
Well, the stakes were high, right? You could spend hundreds of hours on a save game file in an RPG or a programming project or something.
Or homework.
Homework, just enormous amounts of work could be instantly gone with like Jeremy had said in the comments, putting down next to the phone. Phones had magnets in them, and, or electromagnets. When the phone rang, then the magnetism got stronger. So it's just... the stakes were real. The paranoia was real.
I forgot about that, but there was some sort of it was a BBC documentary expose where they were trying to figure out where it was safe to have a floppy disk, and they did a bunch of stuff. They put it on they poured water on it or whatever. But one thing that really did get it was putting it under a ringing phone that it had an actual bell relay. That erased it.
Yeah, and permanent magnet motors are more common than they used to. Everything's got small permanent magnet DC motors in it, and brushless motors that have very strong neodymium magnets in them. That didn't used to be the case. That small motors used to be either non-permanent magnets, so they were only magnetic when they were running, or they were AC. So again, not magnetic when they weren't running. So that's changed a lot. Everything's got tiny DC motors in it now as well.
Yeah.
It always seemed odd to me, or dangerous, or fraught with, dark possibilities, that hard drives, whose the throw of the arm is entirely controlled by, electromagnets, sitting just like 2 inches from the platter wasn't a problem. I guess it just wasn't.
That's a good point. Yeah, I think that speaks to what Paul said, is this stuff's not as vulnerable as we thought it was. But yeah, hard drive magnets are enormously powerful.
Yeah.
Crazy powerful. Yeah, and they're sitting millimeters from the platters. It's
right.
Yeah.
And when I was looking for this, just to put it on the screen, I also found a cookie cutter version of it. I'm not sure exactly what use the the magnet warning cookie is going to be, but anyway, if you want, that is also an option.
That's weird.
Well done. Well done, Paul. Excellent.
Yes. All right. So anyway, when you're done sort of papering, or plastering your entire work area with warning magnet symbols, we can move on to look at what eBay has to offer. And let's see, who's first? Blake, you have the first thing of these.
Okay, I'm just going to do the one, little tiny second one, but we're running a little long here. So, so the thing that caught my eye is it's from the 1980s, the Amust Corporation Mini Robot 1 Simulator Arm. It's also, or additionally known as the HX3000 robotic unit. It's perhaps from Australia, if this topic is relevant to what we're seeing here. But yeah, so basically it looks like, I pictured, when I first saw it, I was thinking, okay, Radio Shack Armatron or something like that we all know. But it looks like one of these, I don't know if anyone remembers the TV series Whiz Kids, and I guess there's probably some people that do remember that. But at the intro to that thing, and I think during one or two episodes, he had this robot arm that he used to pick up a pencil or something to help when they were trying to solve some mystery, local criminals, But it looked very much like this, and so it is. Looking at it's basically a new in box kind of arrangement. It looks like everything is wrapped up. You have this arm, a metallic arm. I've never seen this item before. It's painted in a sort of a gold hue. It's kind of an interesting looking thing. Various pieces that you assemble to create this functional item. It has kind of a gold paint scheme that's unusual, but it looks pretty serious. It has bike chain type control gearing that's tied to motors handling the manipulation on the different axes and joints of this thing. It has a base that has looking at what I'm seeing in the text on some pamphlets that they show in the box. It has a Centronics interface, so presumably a parallel interface to some computer. And there's pictures of the pamphlet showing the thing set up, but what's being sold is still wrapped in the foam and in the plastic wrapping. Something that caught my eye is, the manual cover shows this thing sitting on a desk holding a Matchbox car, and behind it is looks like an NEC PC8801 computer sitting back there. But in the mix of what you get is an interface card that looked to me kind of like an Apple II card, but I can't tell. I mean, it's in a smoked gray static bag, and I mean, a PC8801, if it has slots, its cards might look similar. So I kept trying to find, because I'm an Apple II person, if it was in fact an Apple thing. It's an interesting unit. I have never seen. It looks like it has quite the range of motion, and it has a Z80 processor on board, and you can store. It mentions in the text that you can send commands to it. They'll store it locally, and so even in the case of lost power, it can continue to execute what you've told it to do, or lost communication. not so much power, that would be haunting, rather loss of connection to the host computer. It can continue to do these things. It says it simulates a robot right on the site with faith, speed, and flexibility. This auction is going for $849.95 or best offer. Looks like the seller has sold quite a few things. It's coming out of Raleigh, North Carolina. Free shipping, at least to me. And I wondered if anyone had seen anything like this before, or if that interface card that I'm showing on the stream looks too much like an Apple II card not to be one. Is anyone familiar with this thing at all? I could find basically nothing about this online in searching the various terms, by the way.
Yeah, I've never seen this thing before. The listing says it's from Australia, for whatever that's worth. The ad that is in there, that ad copy sounds like translated from Japanese to me.
Yeah, it does.
It has that sort of cadence of translated Japanese. So this may well be like I said, a PC8801 device or something, or an MSX, device or something. But yeah, I've never heard of it.
Yeah, I'm reading. Go ahead.
I'm just agreeing. I also have not heard of it. I agree that card does look like an Apple II card, but I also agree I can't be sure.
Yeah, there's some of the copy that culminates in the text. The mini robot opens up opportunities for anyone involved or interested in the rapidly changing field of manufacturing and offers you a better way to get ahead of the times of robotics and automation. Developed specifically for R&D and educational purposes. Yeah, I don't know. I had never seen this before, and somehow I thought that was strange. I didn't know how many little desktop robot arms were out there, but I guess there's one more than I had imagined. And presumably it must have cost quite a pretty penny back in the day, I would think.
The ad sounds like it's intended for like testing factory automation code. Like if you're building a robot assembly line for cars, for example, which was a series of big robot arms. Sounds like it might be intended for the educational and/or simulation purposes for writing factory kind of automation software.
Yeah, one of the pamphlets is, and again, it's titled several places, Mini Robot Simulator, as if based on what you're saying, right? Maybe it's simulating a larger scale industrial situation, and you can test it and see if it's gonna, gain sentience or something and start wreaking havoc before you actually go all in. And here it says programming language basic, and it mentions elsewhere that you can use assembly language to program it. And it's interesting that it has an onboard computer, but it also has the Centronics interface to a host. So yeah, I don't know, interesting, but it caught my attention, and I was curious if anyone had heard of it. And I also was curious at how little information I was able to find with some pretty deep searches on this thing. So anyway, he will also consider any good offer, the seller. So there you go. Don't know.
It does feel a little eerie, this idea that even with communication severed, it will continue to go on its rampage.
Yeah. Well, at least it still needs power. I was imbuing it with preternatural capabilities in my misspeaking. I apologize. So anyway, that caught my attention. So that's it for me.
Cool. Jack, did you have one? There's not one here. So
no, I didn't.
Okay.
I didn't take time to look.
Yep. Fair enough. All right. Let's see. Because we recorded, after 2 months, I think something like that from our previous show, we talked for a long time. So I'm going to only talk about 2 things, I think, this time. And the first one probably won't take too long here, but I just thought this was an amazing object. This is the PowerBook weight saving device for the PowerBook G3, G4 Mac.
I love this so much.
Yeah. Okay. So it's a little plastic box, and so what it is, I believe, is that you put it in instead of I think it's instead of maybe it's instead of the battery, but
so
you basically.
I assume it's for those PowerBooks that had a port on both sides, and you'd have like a battery and a floppy drive, or a battery and a hard drive, or 2 batteries, or whatever. Yeah.
So this is it's a box of air that you can put in place of whatever you might have put in that other bay.
Like,
Yeah.
is it helium or something? Is it air that is
I was going to
lighter
say
than the air
hydrogen
around
or
us?
That would be
helium.
great.
Yeah.
That would be
Uh-huh.
cool. So that's,
I
and then you
just,
put two of them up, it just floats up.
I just love that there's an officially branded box of plastic box of air. Like
Yeah.
even for Apple, this is
Yes.
a stretch.
Make no mistake, there's the Apple logo. What we're seeing is an Apple logo, and under it,
Mhm.
in the Apple Garamond font, it says PowerBook Weight Saving Device. So that is the name of this Apple product. It's not just a description that Paul is reading. No, that's what this is.
Which is still technically heavier than just putting nothing in that slot. That also makes me laugh. It is technically worse than the other option.
Unless
But
it
you
is
might
filled
pick
with
up
helium.
mice, things like that. They could start living
Yeah.
in there. They're going to take weight. They're going to weight stuff.
Exactly. Keeps mice out of your PowerBook.
Yeah.
This is so ridiculous.
Yeah. So anyway, if you wanted to get this, it's probably relatively rare actually, but you can buy it
Only
for
$70.
Yeah. And then the other thing, maybe I shouldn't have actually said this, brought this one up just because, but so what it is, I have the Toy Shop by Broderbund. And the thing that I think is so this was released for a bunch of different platforms. And the thing that I think is kind of interesting about this one is in particular the Commodore 64 version. And it is a buy it now for $20. So in fact, if you're listening to this and this seems interesting, you might want to go for this, because what I think is interesting about this is that it has all the stuff, and they all had all the stuff. And this is one of the things where having the stuff is actually relevant. So it's got, the little strings and balloons and paper and stuff like that. And it doesn't matter that it has the Commodore discs, but this is a $20 thing. You can run it on your Apple II or whatever, and use all the little materials to build toys with from the Commodore box. So anyway, that's why I wanted to bring this up. But I know, Quinn, you have some experience with this.
I do. I'm trying very hard not to launch off into an hour about this thing because I loved the Toy Shop. So it was like Print Shop in that you could print stuff out, but you print it out. So you customized the designs, and it has, I think it's 20 or 30 different toys that you could make. It's like papercraft toys. So you would print them out, a series of sheets, and then you would glue them to these self-adhesive cardstock sheets that came in the box. And then you would cut out the pieces and follow the instructions to assemble them into various working toys. So there was a little car with steering that worked, and there was a little excavator with a bucket that, actually cranked up and down. And there was even a little steam engine that actually ran on air. And there was a little catapult. My favorite was the little gyrocopter that had a rubber band in it, so you could wind it up and let it go, and it would fly way off into the air. It was so much fun, this thing. I absolutely loved the Toy Shop, and you don't see it around a lot. I don't think it was, certainly not that many people have heard of it, but it was one of my favorite Apple II things that I ever had.
Wow.
Neat.
That is cool. The box is familiar. I remember seeing ads for it, but it never clicked that this was actually a physical, kind of a real world situation.
Yeah, if you like arts and crafts and like mechanical stuff, then this thing was a blast. And each toy had customization options like the Print Shop. So there'd be a little place where you could put graphics or a little text on there. Like you could put your name on the side of the car or whatever, that kind of stuff. And it would print out your customized version of the car. And then you follow the instructions to cut out and glue together the pieces. And they all had functionality. That was the cool thing. Kind of like Lego stuff, when you build like a Lego car, the steering works or whatever. It was all stuff like that, where there was some sort of mechanical element to it that was functional on all of these little toys. And they were so well designed. Like whoever designed these toys is some secret hero who's not getting enough credit, because they were all incredibly clever. So there was like an airplane, that flew, where you could wind up the propeller, and there was a rubber band in there. So you wind up the propeller and then let it go, and it would fly, a couple 100 feet, stuff like that. Lots of fun.
Wow.
Yeah, it's very cool.
Very cool.
Yeah, and I think the main thing that I wanted to just point out is just that if you're interested in this, don't limit yourself to whatever platform you wanted to run it on, because you can find that software elsewhere. Having all the manuals and the actual sort of like the pieces that come with it, that's possible potentially for cheaper if you have a less inflated price platform.
And also, if you do want to try this stuff, like you don't need the kit necessarily. It's really like you could spray glue the printouts to cardstock, and the rest of it is just rubber bands and balloons and string. So you don't need the kit to build all these toys. If you just want to download the disk images and do it, you still can. Which I think you should. If you have any slight vague interest in this kind of thing, you should do it because it's an incredible experience. You will need the manual though. I assume it's been scanned on archive or something, but you will need the instruction manual to put all the toys together. Also worth noting, the original box does not include enough stuff to build all the toys. That was kind of their dirty trick. They sold expansion packs that had like more cardstock and more balloons and stuff. So if you actually wanted to build all the toys in this package, you had to buy more stuff from them. So I built, I think 10 of them or 8 of them or something, and then ran out of the cardstock and stuff. But, yeah.
Nice.
Cool.
That's really cool.
All right. I think I'm gonna stop it there, or at least I'm gonna leave my options there. And yeah, we've been recording for a long time, so we can perhaps turn to and it's very late in Sweden, as Jack is increasingly aware. So we can turn to closing discussions. And Blake, you have any closing notes?
Well, aside from running around with magnets and deleting data left and right, I think I guess one of the things I'll mention, I thought about pulling them out and holding them up to show, but I've mentioned this. I think that I ordered some of these things before. They are USB-C, or I mean, these happen to be USB-C, but USB, I guess, more generally, power supply replacements for some of the older systems. I have one for the Apple IIc now. I have one for the Atari 8-bit. I have a couple of Atari 8-bit systems, and the power bricks are kind of just a pain to deal with, but also they can fail destructively. I managed to kill 2 8-bit Ataris within 5 minutes with what I learned is the dreaded ingot style power supply. And I do realize that, in fact, it's almost certainly the RAM that is dead, and so it could be fixed. I have them on a shelf, but I replaced them on eBay. But yeah, it's like basically, I saw when I was looking for eBay items for this episode, I saw some more people are manufacturing these things. They cost like $10, $20 if you want to display. I have an Apple IIc version, and the Atari A8 version I have has a little readout that shows you the voltage that's coming in. They're cheap. You can use any kind of USB brick to power it, and it's got to be safer than these 40-year-old huge boxes. And I mentioned that I noticed if you leave them plugged in and don't use a power strip to power them off, they stay warm. My Apple IIc's brick that's 40 years old, it's over there on my off Apple IIc, warm all the time. So it felt really good to pull those out and stick them on the shelf and just use these USB items. And so I guess what I plan to do is, look, and however often I can remove other power supplies, I'm going to go ahead and spend the $10-15 and just go one by one and do that. So I have had only success with it. It's never acted flaky. I'm sure it's much safer than the original ancient ones. So I would have to recommend that other people do this as well, because and they're easy to find. I mean, you do a search and they all look different, and some have displays, some don't. But it feels like
they're easy to find unless you have one and you've put it in the other room.
Well, I actually bought one and immediately lost it, as I think I told you. So I instantly lost it, and so I ordered another one for the 2C. And shockingly, when I installed the other one, or it arrived at the door, the original one did not instantly reappear, which I thought would happen. But it feels like an easy, inexpensive, very proactive, functional way to preserve these old systems. It feels really good to do this, because that's a worry I always have, or cats dying in these power supplies. So think about it. If you've got these systems laying around and you like to turn them on occasionally. So I'll keep people appraised of the success or any pitfalls. But yeah, so I guess that's my latest upcoming near-term retro plans. Otherwise, just enjoying the summer and having my daughter home from college for the first summer after first year. So that's nice too. So.
Cool.
Nice.
And Jack, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, a little bit. I did one interesting retro adjacent thing a couple months ago. I think it was right before Easter. My wife and I participated in a game jam, which I've done numerous times before. It's been several years since last. But the cool thing with this one is actually, it was sponsored by Zombie Atari. So everyone who participated got I'm wearing the t-shirt. We got a t-shirt, the iRebel game. We have the logo here. So just the,
Nice.
and actually this t-shirt was actually, it was at the time, it was they put it for sale on the website for like $80, but then gave us a code to get it for free. I think the point was they didn't actually want people to buy it, so that's why they priced it at $80. But everyone who participated, they got a code. But so the one fun aspect of this was, I think we talked more than once before in the past about Jeff Minter, and Blake, you have Tempest 2000 running on the screen behind you there this whole time. And for those who don't know, he's a developer. He's in Wales. He's been making games since, I don't know, the early 1980s, I think. And so he made games for every old 8-bit system, well, all the ones, primarily the ones that were available in England at the time, and does a lot of like really trippy visualizer thingies and stuff. And it's still working. He and his partner are still making new games and stuff. And so he and his partner at Llamasoft, was the name of the company, they were actually judging the games. And so that was sort of fun. There were about 20. I think there were about 20 different games that were submitted. 20 teams that submitted something, and there were 3 or 4 prizes. My wife and I did not win a prize, but we had fun anyway. And I think every other game jam that I've been a part of before was just like, it's just hobbyists doing it together for fun, and there's not really, there's no swag, there's no like real prizes or anything. But this one, like, we got T-shirts. Everyone got a downloadable. There is a sort of an interactive documentary thingy about Llamasoft that runs on the current consoles, and I think it's on Steam also.
Yeah,
it's got a code for that, and that's pretty fun because it's both like documentary material and includes a lot of emulated games, like 20 or 30 emulated games, including Tempest 2000. And so it's like a bunch of old 8-bit games of his that I'd never played before, because I think his first game I played was probably what was called Lamatron, I think, the Robotron clone from the early 90s. I played on Atari ST and or Amiga. So anyway, it was fun to sort of be involved in something where Jeff Minter, aka Yak, his old screen name was always Yak, and have Yak be there, having played my game and stuff. And in doing this, I actually built the game using Godot, which is it's not really new. It's been around for a long time, but it's kind of an alternative to Unity, Unreal, and these things. It's mostly for 2D gaming, but there's also 3D gaming. But it's nice because it's completely open source. And I was amazed to find that when it was time to sort of like say, okay, now we've done enough. The time limit is over. We're going to submit something. You could very easily not only build Mac and Windows binaries, but also build a web binary that just runs in a web browser.
Nice.
Which is pretty, I can actually, if you'll humor me for a moment. Let's see how this works.
I didn't realize that Godot had released yet. I've been waiting for that.
Oh yeah, Godot's been around for a while. And so this is just, I have this hosted on itch.
No one got that.
Yes.
Maybe it just wasn't that funny. Sorry.
I love this.
And so this game is called Alien Beast Inspector. So I'm a little green blob, and now I'm a fox. Oops, I died.
You're an X-Fox.
Yeah. And so, but the point is that over time, in consecutive levels, you can sort of become different creatures, and then you can mix and match Oh, damn it. there's a problem with the controls that
Sure.
anyway, it's neither here nor there. But it was a fun thing to do. And later on in the game you can mix and match. So if like I get the fox, and then I also get a frog, and then I can go to a machine that lets me have, okay, I'm gonna have the front half of a fox and the back half of a frog, or the front half of a goose and the back half of a llama. And so like the different things then have sort of different physics that let you move around in levels. But I didn't really have time to do all of the things we wanted to do, but it felt really sort of fun to get something up and running. So
that's awesome. Did you guys do all the graphics as well, all the artwork?
So all the characters my wife did. She animated all of those. The kind of like backgrounds and platform stuff, there was some freely available resources we used.
Gotcha.
But yeah, so she did little graphics for a fox and a llama and a squid and a goose and just other different things.
Oh, I love that.
It was fun.
Your description of the game sounds almost exactly like what I might expect Jeff Minter to release as his next effort. It's the back end of a fox and then the front end of a llama, and
right.
You just need some trippy psychedelic. Yeah,
right.
I'm a huge Minter fan. That must have been quite a thrill.
Yeah, it was fun
to take part in.
And then at some point, afterwards, Atari released sort of a video podcast where they showed the Llamasoft guys playing some of the games and talking about them. Did not include ours in what they were showing, unfortunately. But that's okay. Yeah. But the ones who won prizes were very, very worthy. There were some really nice. There were lots of really nice entries. And the theme of this, they announced the theme right before the time was going to start. So it was a 1 week thing, and the day it was starting, they announced the theme, which was Perfect Beast. Then you had, from that moment, you have to start to think about, okay, what are we going to build in the theme of Perfect Beast? And we landed on this kind of 2D platformer where you can sort of mix and match bits to say, okay, what is the perfect beast for this situation? I got to fly over here and I got to do this and whatever.
That's cool.
So
that's really interesting.
Sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Wow. Awesome.
That's about it. That's the most retro related stuff that I've done lately.
Cool. For me, I think probably the thing that I've been most sort of involved in recently is this now upcoming fairly soon conference, the Init Hello conference. So we just talked about this in the last episode, but that was when we were only just kind of like getting started with this. So it's getting closer in time now. And so this is it's at July 26th and 27th in Maryland. There's at the System Source Computer Museum we talked about last time. That's just a big, Apple II in-person weekend. And so now we actually have kind of like a schedule set up. So we've got a lot of people sort of scheduled, a lot of workshops scheduled, and I've been working on helping put that together. And so that Shuffle Puck tournament we're going to have there. And it reminded me actually also there's going to be a programming contest here. It's a 6-line programming contest in honor of the slot in which the disk drive's in. Okay, well, I won't sign into the site, but and I was going to do sort of the same kind of thing where I'm running that, but so at the beginning of the contest, I will announce something that these programs have to include. So you can't work on your 6 lines ahead of time, but I just have to think of what kind of thing that could be. But anyway, it's been a fair amount of work trying to get it set. If you are listening to this, maybe this is just for the YouTube people. If you're listening to this, the deadlines are coming up super soon for things like hotel reservations and shirts. So if you're listening and interested, do not delay. Yeah, anyway, I'm really looking forward to actually seeing this happen. So, but that's probably much of what I've been spending my retro type time on, except for editing the previous podcasts on the feed. There's actually one other thing apart from that I wanted to mention, which is that when we close this off, I talk about we have a Gopher server and you can get lo-fi episodes at rcrpodcast.com. And what we do is we have a Amazon S3 bucket which you can access through the web. in an unencrypted way. So it can sort of act like a static web server. And so this was actually a pretty good thing for, old computers not able to do encryption. But some robot found that server, and so we went from the free tier to the terabytes of data going out monthly tier. So that's been shut down for a while I try to figure out if there's some way to limit the robots from downloading all the lo-fi episodes. So if you were looking for the episodes to play on your old machine, they may not be there anymore, but we're hoping to get them back. But at the moment, they're offline. So yeah, anyway, that's me. Quinn, any closing notes?
Well, you guys are tough acts to follow. I have not created any new video games or conferences since we last talked. But I've actually had a very slow retro period because it's been a very busy spring and summer with other life stuff. But I will add to what Blake was saying. The other computer to really watch for on power supplies is the Commodore 64. Everybody universally says that when those power supplies fail, they take the whole computer with them. So it's a suicide pact. And I've been told if you buy a Commodore 64, don't even plug in the power supply, just throw it in the trash and buy one of the modern replacements, of which there are many, many for that machine. So that seems like good advice. As far as I know, the Apple IIs are safe in that way. The power supply, my 2GS died and into a dead short, but it's a switching power supply with a crossbar switch in it, and that switch just trips and it doesn't allow it to hurt the computer. So, but some of the brick on a leash power supplies like the Commodore and the Ataris they're much more primitive. I think they're actually linear power supplies, and they fail to a dead short that exposes the computer to said dead short. So they are a suicide pact. But anyway, that's all I wanted to add there, and I have nothing else to offer. I am shamed by my co-hosts, and I will do better next time.
All right.
And I want to say during Paul's talk there about Init Hello, that's when I finally understood your joke about waiting for Godot.
Okay. No, I don't know.
Right past me somehow.
I I try to be funny sometimes, but thank you. I appreciate it.
I heard you say tough crowd, and I was like, what is he even talking about?
Yeah.
It just sailed right by me.
It's all right. It's all right. But thank you. I appreciate that. And I wanted to say for Paul's mention of Init Hello, I think many of us are appreciative of his effort. I'm looking very forward to being there. And I've blocked my hotel. I've ordered my T-shirt. I just got to, get the stickers figured out. And so it'll be nice to get there. And I don't think there's a promise for any stickers. I'm just being silly, but
there will be stickers. They've been made. The stickers exist. So yes.
Okay. Excellent. But no, it sounds great. And I live in DC, so I'm only hour and a half away. And I was unaware of the System Source Computer Museum. It looks quite interesting. And yes, I'm very much looking forward to seeing all the folks there, including yourself, Paul. So that's something I'm very much looking forward to here in just a few weeks, really. Not quite 2 months. So
nice.
Yeah, I guess what is it? 7 weeks or so, maybe? Something like that.
Something in that range. A little more than a month.
Yeah. So very much looking forward to that. That'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think so. Sorry. All right. Well, good to see everybody. Welcome back, Jack. Glad to have you here.
Glad to be here.
So that's it for this show. You can find the show notes for this and all the RCR shows at rcrpodcast.com. You can find lo-fi episodes and more via Gopher at rcrpodcast.com at some point when they come back. You can discuss the show. It's been too long. You can discuss the show in the forums at forum.vcfed.org somewhere. You can follow RCR on Mastodon. We are podcasts. We are at RCR Podcast at podcasts.social. You can follow RCR on Blue Sky at rcrpodcast.com. You can join the Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/RCR Podcast. And you can send feedback to feedback@rcrpodcast.com. You can write a review on iTunes if you wish. And until next time, Retrocompute. Maybe countdown. I don't know. 2, 1, 0.
I usually wait too long, so I went early. I went early this time, and
YouTube channel that I watch does a similar ending, and they have a countdown. They go 3, 2, 1, get on board. That's their ending.
right.
So
Okay.
we should do that because they do it perfectly every time because they have the countdown. So yeah.
And we do it perfectly every time on the feed because I edit it to be so.
Yes, that's
Yeah. Excellent.
line
it
up
is-
all
yeah.
the tracks.
Okay. Anyway, yes, I should go. But this is great.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
Thanks,
we'll
everybody.
see you
and
all for the
thanks,
next one.
Yeah.
Thanks, chat, for
Thanks everyone,
hanging in there,
and
everybody.
nice to see you folks.
Yep. All right. Bye, YouTube.
Bye-bye.